Now, I say that a little fast, and it's a little bit gibberish, but newly arriving immigrants will assimilate into the politics of the locale where they arrive. And if you don't believe that, go to Boston and find me an Irish Catholic Republican. There actually are 2 of them. Is it 3 of them now? All right, good. I know another one. And but there aren't very many, because politics are heritage. It's something that you learn that in a way you learn your religion. And if people don't understand the politics of America, and they come from Ireland and they go to Boston, they go with their good buddies down to the pub and they get involved and walk in the streets with the unions and the political activists. If they go to South Central LA down to Maxine Waters District, then what do they get if they are involved in politics at all? They're involved with the politics of their neighbors. They assimilate into the politics of the locale where they arrive. Another thing about assimilation is people gravitate towards like kind. It's a natural thing. White people, black people, everybody gravitates towards like kind. I saw it happen in college when I was in the cafeteria line. You can look at the cafeteria line and people of one colored bunch here, people of another colored bunch there. You can just look around. Why does that happen? We go to class together, we mix up together, we assimilate when we're randomly assimilating, we get along fine. But if you leave us alone, slowly we migrate back to the most like kind we can find. And I mean, I saw this in my family reunion. My mother, there are 5 siblings in her family. Each of them have 5 kids. And it had been about 10 years since we had a reunion, a family reunion. So we went to the park out in the, it was a nice place with picnic tables scattered out. So I thought my job was to go and visit my relation that I hadn't seen, some of them in 10 years. So I would go sit down at the picnic table. They'd be sitting, one nuclear family, 5 kids, mom, dad, right there. And my job was to go see them. And I wanted to see them. So I would go sit down at the picnic table and start to chat away. And pretty soon I'd notice that a couple of them start to talk with each other, and then another one would go drift off here, and then that couple would go back around, and I'd be sitting there talking to one person who I had eye contact with. The rest of them were all went to an empty table to reform. Now this is pretty interesting. So I go to another table and watch a similar and maybe the same thing happen. So it isn't a racist thing. We gravitate towards like kind. We gravitate towards people who have common beliefs, common interests. And it might well be that I have a lot more in common with let me say, an African-American family of middle-class, similar political and religious beliefs than I have in common with some left-wing liberal that wants to deconstruct America's Constitution. But we gravitate towards like kind. That's another one of those principles. And the redistricting part of this is, I've seen some numbers on this, and I actually thought it was CIS's numbers and maybe Steve Camarata's, but that there are 9 to 11 congressional seats in America that would be shifted if we counted citizens instead of people. And those in California and Texas and Florida among them. And when that happens, and Maxine Waters can be reelected with 40,000 votes, and Steve King has to have 120,000 votes to get reelected, that tells you what kind of representation is there. And then the Bush administration, when they were pushing for this amnesty plan, what they did was, as they pushed this, it was something that made it difficult for a lot of us. I mean, I've stood up for the rule of law, and I'll continue to do that. But that undermining of it and saying citizenship must be for sale, at that time it was $1,500. And Karl Rove and I, by the way, had a 35-minute argument on the cell phone after I sent that letter, and I could not convince them to pull back from this because they wanted to engineer this thing politically for some reason. Now, I want to describe the politics of this. How does this work across America? First of all, one of the reasons we're prosperous is because we have been expanding and improving the middle class in America. So the roots of prosperity. So I'm going to talk to you just about it in this metaphor of a barbell. And think of that bar and the barbell being the middle class. And then you look over here on the right side and you've got all the business interests that believe that they have somehow a right to cheap labor, and that cheap labor can pay $9,000 in taxes and draw down $32,000 in welfare benefits out of somebody else's tax dollars, and meanwhile that employer can hire that person for less money than it takes to sustain their family, paid for by some other taxpayers and sometimes paid for by grandchildren yet to be born in today's economy. And these are Democrats and Republicans over on this side of the barbell. And so there's weight over there. And the other side is the political gain of people that believe that are opening up the borders and bringing in the numbers that we've heard about because they get counted in the redistricting, whether they are voters, whether they're citizens, or whether they aren't. So the weight over on this side of the barbell of the political power is a huge mass that has shifted the political center in America, at least to some degree, if not, and I think a significant degree. The other side are Democrats and Republicans that want cheap labor and they advocate for it. And some of them will say, my religious beliefs tell me this, I'm helping people out. But it's self-interest. And it's self-interest. So in the middle class is the barbell, and the middle class is being squeezed by the cheap labor on the right-hand side of the weights of the barbell and the illegal political capital on the left-hand side of the barbell. Then on the wages, you need to know that we are experts in some of these fields, and so are the Democrats. Teddy Kennedy was an expert. I remember him standing before the white-shirted protesters that they were the ones that were going to do the American walkout, a day without immigrants. So Teddy Kennedy went before them, and he had to use an interpreter. I remember watching this happen at the Capitol, and he said, "Some say, report to be deported. I say, report to become an American citizen." That was Teddy. Now, that's the clarion call to all of you people come across the border as fast as you can, and we're the people that are going to make you new American citizens and Democrats. We embrace you all. I mean, that was just right straight up front. That's what we saw. And another thing is that, you know, there's work Americans won't do. We all know that's false. That there aren't enough Americans in the workforce. Before this economy went down, I looked at the Department of Labor's numbers. We had at that time 6.9 million working illegals in America by just uncontested numbers. I think it's more. So I looked through and I added up those that aren't in the workforce from 16 years old on up. And I did go to 74 because Walmart's hiring at 74 and we're paying unemployment benefits at 74. So, but in that age group, in those age groups, 16 to 74, Americans not working, 69 million. So I can remember those numbers. 6.9 million working illegals doing jobs Americans won't do, 69 million Americans not in the workforce for some reason. Couldn't we make 1 out of 10 of those 69 million an offer they couldn't refuse and put them to work, working in the places where those jobs are? Next thing, and I want to conclude with this idea, and it's called the New Idea Act. I drafted this legislation a cycle or two ago, and it's something that is emerging, and I think it's a very, very solid immigration idea that couples with E-Verify. But I want to use that. What we have, I want to use the IRS. So the New Idea Act stands for the New Illegal Deduction Elimination Act. And what it does is it sets the IRS up to help enforce immigration law, and it clarifies that wages and benefits paid to illegals are not deductible for federal income tax purposes. So when the IRS comes in and audits an employer, as they typically will do, they would run the Social Security numbers through E-Verify, and if that bounces their names back again, the IRS could say, sorry, that $30,000 or $40,000 that you paid to this individual isn't a business expense for you. You don't get to write that off like you would fuel or electricity or wages to an American. That's now goes over into the other column, which presumably is taxable. So the bottom line is your $10 an hour illegal becomes a $16 an hour illegal. And in the bill, we require the IRS to set up a system to cooperate with the Social Security Administration and the Department of Homeland Security so that the right, left, and middle hand know what each other are doing. For the first time in government, it would be, I know. This is one of those solid ideas that puts the agencies to work, that generates revenue, that gets the job done, that lets any employer go through this system. The $10 an hour illegal becomes a $16 an hour illegal, and the American for $12, $13, $14, or $15 an hour gets a job under that scenario. We can do a lot of things to be a lot smarter about what we do, but we need to close our borders. We need to shut off the jobs magnet. We need to enforce the law. We need to be smart about what we do. We need to understand that culturally people assimilate into the politics where they arrive. And there is a plot and a plan against Americanism that's being driven by the liberals in America, and they are completely cynical about taking away your liberty, and open borders is one of their methods. Thank you very much.